meeting called to order. I guess the first thing on our agenda is the, well, have no public comments. And then we're going to review and discuss the board operating procedures first. I thought the way that, Rosie, whatever you and Chris also say, but I thought I would go through and tell you what I see in this thing, and I want to add a couple of things to page, well, this is page 1.
You just go through, I will find where you're at and I will take it.
All right, well, just the initial, the title page, the initial page.
Okay.
And some of this I've stolen from the other, when we looked at other operating procedures from other districts. In the first paragraph, the last sentence, the Board of Trustees is the corporate policy-making body for the district, and the superintendent and staff provide the leadership to implement policy. Instead of saying implement policy, I want to see what you folks think about this. I wanted it to say to accomplish the district's vision, mission, and goals. To accomplish the district's vision, mission, and goals.
Got it.
That was one of my suggestions.
Okay.
And then
so we do cover that in the second sentence.
I think the reason for the second sentence of the first paragraph, and you guys do what you want, but they always impose upon us on our training, board makes policy, we follow policy.
Right.
In very
Okay.
simplistic
Okay.
terms. So I
And-
think when accomplishing the district's vision, mission, and goals, I think that is another thought. I think this was in line with that initial training, and you can take it where you want, it doesn't really matter.
Okay, and I'll defer to you guys. That's just, and of course, I'm trying to make, I'm doing it for purposes of clarity. But at the same time, I don't want to be wordy.
What if you put that in and just added, so to accomplish the district's mission, vision, and goals through proper implementation of policy or something
policy
like that.
implementation.
Policy
I
implementation.
like that too.
All right.
And then-
Sold.
Got it. Okay.
And then I wanted to add an additional sentence. And that can go between paragraph 1 and paragraph 2. And the sentence, or the paragraph will read as follows. The Belton Independent School District Board operating procedures have been established based on legal policies approved, and local policies adopted by the Board of Trustees.
Okay. Would you read to me one more time, please?
Yeah, the Belton Independent School District Board operating procedures have been established based on legal policies approved and local policies adopted by the Board of Trustees.
No objection.
No objection. Council, any objections to that?
No? Sounds good.
Okay. All right. Page 3, under integrity. And of course, we're looking at the section involving board ethics. So page 3, integrity, where it said, we use the word there each time. Make no personal promise or private action that may compromise their performance or responsibilities.
I caught the same thing. It's like you stole my document.
Okay. So what's your suggestion on that, Chris?
Well, I actually didn't work out a solution to that, right? But it seemed weird. Like I wasn't real clear on who there was.
Right, that's my question.
Yeah.
So
And so I wanted to actually talk that out. You know, what did we mean there?
Can we just put the word board in there?
Yeah, actually.
You know, compromise the board's performance or responsibilities.
Yeah.
Um,
And that works in the second to last bullet, seeking continuing education that will enhance board ability to fulfill. Yeah, I mean, that works in both
Seeking
cases.
continued education that will enhance the board's
Simple.
ability to fulfill its duties effectively.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Angela, I see your wheels turning. Any
Yeah,
thought on?
is this copied right out of legal?
Well, no, it's out, well, part of it is legal, yes. It was, I think Katie ISD's. So it's the same pieces, but they are in clusters, i.e. respect, accountability, et cetera.
Yeah, I caught that. Pronoun.
And it's the only place where we actually do that.
Right.
It's the document that I found,
Mhm.
yeah.
Angela, you okay with that?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if that should be the individual's performance.
Right, that was the other thing that floated through my mind, so I want to make sure that we,
We can put board members' performance.
the board, the
Let's do
respective
each.
board members' performance or
That
responsibilities.
seems to make more sense.
Okay.
Yeah, good with that.
Because,
And that's consistent with the rest of the section too.
yeah,
so.
okay.
Okay.
We just need to clarify, I mean, the there to me is not clear.
Okay.
So if someone new came on the board and they read this and said, well, wait a minute, who's that apply to?
Yeah.
And I want that question
It's a
asked.
third,
Yep.
in the third person, it doesn't seem to
Right.
be very,
Right. Okay, then page 4, of course, we just mentioned a moment ago, HB 2840 information is going to be plugged in at some point. Do we have anything else on that, Angela, yet?
we do.
We
We
do?
have
Okay.
a lot.
Not a lot, okay, all right. So, would you, I mean, obviously, that's going to be legal, whatever,
There is some local, there's some decisions to be made about time limits and
Okay.
what, on what you wish to allow public comment. In other words, do you want to limit public comment to agenda items, or do you want to allow public comment on any topic? And do you want to distinguish between regular meetings and special meetings? So there are a couple of decision
Yeah.
points to be made that we'll talk about when we look at BE.
Well, so the way it's written in this document is board meetings, public comment is boundless as far as topic goes.
Right. They can-
But then committee meetings is specific to the committee
agenda item,
is the way that it's written in this
Right.
document right now.
the way it's written now.
Yeah,
That's what TSB had given us.
yeah.
So Angela, what's the change? I mean, can we keep it that way, where
You can keep it that way.
where public comment is limited? Well, public comment can be on anything, whether it's an agenda item or not.
Right.
You can.
For your
Okay.
board meeting.
For your board
In
meetings.
board meetings.
But I want to challenge y'all to think about whether or not you want to do that. Because now you can't limit time. And your meetings are your meetings in public. And so if you open up any regular meeting to public comment on any agenda item, what most boards are doing, because you are limited in the way you can control or limit that, you could have
We could have
a
public
meeting
comment
completely taken
for
over.
2 hours.
You could have
Yeah.
it all night.
Or we could have that
Right.
anyway.
But it not be on even a matter on your agenda.
Right.
So you could have, let's say, there's something brewing in the community that you're not ready to take action on, or you're still studying.
Right.
Let's go back to the new high school, when there was still conversation about whether or not we should build a second high school.
Right.
And you were just at the beginning of the process, and you had a group that wanted to basically take over your meeting to advocate for only keeping Belton High School.
Mhm.
So even though it wasn't on your agenda, you could have these folks who take the mic and take over your meeting, and you never get to your agenda. You're not ready to get to the agenda item at all. Now, the proposed BED does give the board president some, you're not just at the mercy of the clock and have people just filibuster. The board president can impose some reasonable restrictions to comment. But
But they can have as many people comment on the topic
right.
as they want. So
Correct.
if someone reads it correctly,
Mhm.
they really can.
They can, and it would be regardless of whether or not it's an item on the agenda or not.
Mhm. So
So
we do
that's a
self-
decision that's a decision point. Do you want to limit your board meetings to agenda items? And then you could have special meetings that are not, it's either or. You're given some discretion on how you want to limit it. Some meetings you could open it, some meetings you limit it. What you don't have discretion on is time.
This varies some from what we were told before from TASB, and I called them directly. Because what they told before, and the superintendents have talked about a lot, is we were told, and the others had heard the same thing, is that we could put time restrictions on them. That was number one. That's not what this is. And I'm assuming this is the official document because it was sent out, but that was what was said. The second thing is that on regular board meetings, they could talk about anything they wanted to, and we didn't have any right to control that. And this is something different on that one, too. They did say on committee meetings, you can restrict it to the agenda. And then there was a third one that's different. So I'm just confused. This has nothing to do with us here, but this is different from what we've been told. And I know TASB, like the rest of us, is trying to figure it out too. So I guess we go with what they sent and don't worry about what they had told us before, because it's different.
Well, the board has some choices. The board can limit it to agenda item or not.
According to this, yeah.
They can limit time when necessary to effective meeting management, but they can't. So there are 2 or 3 points where you have some discretion. The thing you don't have discretion on is public comment has to be allowed at every meeting, because there were some boards that weren't allowing public comment ever on anything. So now the law is you have to allow public comment before you consider anything. What
And it's
discretion?
unlimited,
Yes.
According to this.
except that the president has some level of control in what way?
So,
Are there words
an
in the statute?
example of people who have decided we're just going to take over the board's meeting, and you have a packed house, and you've got people lined up at the mic.
So it's an efficiency issue.
Yeah,
So for the sake of efficiency,
yeah.
the board president can intervene and take control over that.
To say I'm going to impose some restrictions, and they're neutral to any, they're content neutral, regardless of what the people have to say.
So if there's 300 people sitting there waiting to make a comment, you can limit it to a minute each.
You can't go under a minute, according to this.
You can't go under a minute.
That's what this says.
That's what the proposed,
So you'd
and
be
there
under
are
300
different
minutes.
options. Yeah.
It seems to me if you limit it to the agenda, we do ourselves a favor.
You do.
So
Yes.
for the sake of efficiency, then we should limit, the reasonable thing would be to limit the comments to the agenda items.
It would. And the.
Otherwise, we would never, every time we could never conclude a meeting and
Right.
address the agenda.
And
item.
you could have public comments on an item that is not right for your consideration, isn't appropriate for your consideration, is something you already decided, you've moved on. It's really open. And what TASB's proposed in your BED local is conforms to our present policy. So they have said, we've looked at what you're doing right now, and we're proposing a policy that's consistent to what you're doing right now. But that doesn't mean that you can't make some changes to it.
And BED legal, underneath time limits, it says the board may adopt reasonable rules regarding the public's right to address the board under these provisions, including rules that limit the total amount of time that a member of the public may address the board on a given item. So legal is saying that, the way I read that, the board can put limits on it, including rules that limit the total amount of time that a member, should be individual, of the public may address the board on a given item. So I see this in conflict with this. based upon what I see in front of me.
And we've also got it embedded in this document somewhere
Well-
that I can't seem to find.
So,
I
so
know it's in
legal
here
is
somewhere.
you can limit an individual's time to speak. You can't limit the total amount
Correct, I agree, absolutely. I agree with
unless you've got some effective meeting management issue according to the proposed language, which is going to be an
So they use-
extreme circumstance when you do have 300 people and
Right.
you just do the math and you realize you're not going to be able to hear from them.
So right now, you've got a 5-minute time limit. I think that's what you guys have. So y'all can, according to legal, y'all can retain that 5-minute time limit.
Hmm.
Okay.
Or you could make it 3 minutes.
Yes, absolutely. And you just can't go under a minute, according to that. But what Angela's saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, you certainly can't limit if you have 500 people that want to go 5 minutes each. I mean, they each have to have their time, and you can't say you have to choose a representative unless
Right.
in
you
the
can't-
local.
Right, you can't
affects
choose a
management.
representative anymore.
Right. Well, they could, but you
But
can't
would that
force
be
it.
an effective, yeah?
That's particularly
You just can't
prohibited
force
by
it.
the
Yeah,
statute, but
okay.
you can
Okay.
say, all right, we want to hear from everybody. You can do the math here and see if
Yeah.
everybody had 5 minutes, we don't
Correct.
have time. So tonight, we're going to limit it to a minute, and that's what the proposed BED allows. So I think.
So everyone has essentially everyone has a voice. It's
Right.
is the spirit of the
There you
statute.
go.
Absolutely.
Is to give everyone a say-so.
Absolutely.
So right now, the BED local is proposed to be consistent with what you're doing, which it allows public comment regardless of whether the topic's on the agenda. You do have the discretion to limit public comment to topics on the agenda.
I'd take it.
That's what I would do. And I would say that the nature of the board meetings is changing, that people are feeling more comfortable to come in and to make public comment. I think we're just in a different time and the district is changing.
Well, and you know what's interesting, so let's play this out. There have been times in the past where we've had public comments that did take quite a bit of the board's time on a matter that wasn't on the agenda. And frankly, were really inappropriate, period. Even though they're certainly welcome to express their opinion, if it was limited to matters on the agenda, they probably would have been more relevant as it.
Right. I think it just helps people to stay healthier, right? So have your voice,
some
but
guidance.
Well, and how can we be effective if we're hearing comments on things that we have no idea what the issue is?
It puts you in an awkward spot.
Well, comments are for naught,
It's-
essentially.
Right, because it's not a matter on the agenda, so you're not allowed to discuss it.
Right.
So on the, and then I'm going to let you finish with this so we can get through this and we can come back to the local policy. But on the regular meetings, the wording right now is based upon their recommendation. The board shall permit public comment regardless of whether the topic is on the agenda. So their local recommended is that it's carte blanche. Anybody can say anything that they want under regular meetings. Now, special meetings, they say that it's limited to the items on the agenda. So I guess my question is, Angela, I'm assuming that the board has the right to do the same thing that's listed on these special meetings under regular meetings.
It does.
Okay.
Because all 2840 legislated was that public comment be allowed before any matters considered.
Okay.
Where are you reading from, Ronnie?
I'm reading in this local policy comparison packet that you had at your place
Oh, right here?
tonight.
Yeah, well,
you got it?
yeah, this is,
Yep.
okay. And where did you read, just a moment ago, you read from special meetings, regular meetings?
I read
procedures?
underneath BED local, underneath, it's in blue ink.
Right,
Under regular meetings and special meetings.
Okay.
And those are worded differently. Regular meetings in this is that anybody can say anything that they want. Special meetings, it has to be upon agenda or posted agenda items. So what we were talking about is that underneath regular meetings, this would not be the language that y'all would want to adopt. You would want to adopt the same language as under special meetings.
right.
In
That
limiting.
public comment would be limited to agenda items.
That is correct.
I mean, it just seems,
That is
it
correct.
seems,
I can definitely see the other side, but there are other mechanisms to voice that concern to potentially get it on the agenda in the future, right?
correct.
And so I think there are mechanisms to handle the things that we might need to hear or want to hear, or maybe might not want to hear, but there's other ways to kind of get that in and into the system so everybody still does have their time.
Yeah, and remember, you are their representatives.
Right.
So, and especially because you have several that, are not at large. So they are to contact their representatives and express
Right.
those concerns to you guys, and you can either answer those,
Right.
or you can bring them to Suzanne or us, and we determine whether or not it's a future agenda item. That's per your
Right,
policy.
right. So there's still a way to get that into the.
Well, that's one way for a constituent to contact the board member that they reside in. Or, but can't, like the gentleman that made comments the other day, that wasn't an agenda item.
No, it wasn't.
Okay, so, now, make sure I understand this. So a person can come and address us on an item that's not on the agenda?
Not what you're talking about right
Yeah,
now.
not right now.
No, right.
Like in the past, we've had somebody come forward and talk about like lunch shaming, right? Or,
Right.
whatever. That definitely wasn't on the agenda.
Okay.
If you go to restricting to the agenda, it's going to be a change for your community because that's not what they're used to right now. And I'm not saying to
Yeah.
or to not do, but it would be a change.
Well, I mean, I'm looking at obviously we're growing.
Right.
Okay, we're gonna have two schools before long. I mean, for the sake of efficiency, if something we could always change it later if it becomes a problem, right?
Yeah.
So if we leave it as is, I mean, it's been working for a long time, right?
That was going to be my suggestion at this juncture is let it roll kind of the way it is. If it becomes a problem, it's easier to restrict it than to restrict it and then open it up sometimes. And once you restrict it, you'll never open it up again. So
Well, we're only talking about it because of this new bill
that's correct.
that says
That's
that
correct.
we have to allow public comment at the beginning of every meeting.
And y'all have done that.
Yeah.
And
So
we've
your
done
general
that.
public ain't gonna know any different.
But I want to play devil's advocate.
Okay.
That's why we're here.
Because if you, generally, changes are easier to make when they're parts of updates after legislative sessions.
Yes.
If you decided at a later date, this has gotten out of hand, and we want to go back and change that and revisit it, that means this policy's gonna be pulled out and considered alone, for maybe not as part of a packet. And if it's being done in response to a topic that, well, it makes it more difficult for the board to maybe take action, but you're doing it to respond to something
Right,
you
right.
didn't like.
Right.
And then that subjects you to criticism for shutting down
Right.
people. At this point, it's neutral. If you changed it, it wouldn't be in response to public comment you didn't like. It would
Well,
just be as, an opportunity to make a change that was neutral.
Right. In my mind's eye, the change would be, first of all, in reaction to the new bill, first of all.
Right, yeah.
And secondly, to, look at the big picture. Something could happen in the future where we're growing and issues become more and more prevalent in our community. And then if we implement the policy now, then we have a way of addressing that. We don't have to go back, as you say.
Yeah, and the
and-
other thing to keep in mind is when you had it open, you had a 30-minute time limit. So there was never, even if the topics were not on your agenda, there was never a risk that your meeting was going to be waylaid because of the issues being presented. It's 30 minutes.
Right,
so
and because of this statute, that
you can't limit that
we
time.
can't limit that. So, to me, we're discussing it in reaction or in response to the statute,
Right.
so that we don't have a problem later on.
I agree, and I go back to the community is changing, and the community feels much more comfortable coming and talking to us and having limits in place.
Yeah,
I think
and
can
then
be
the
only
idea is
benefit.
that with the new statute, everyone has an opportunity to be heard,
Yes.
and we're not keeping that right from anybody. But we're limiting the comments to the agenda items if we make the change, right?
Right.
Okay, I'm gonna give you one that's coming up. The guy that came last time
Mhm.
on having a conservative superintendent. I think it's the video's going. But anyway, he has already called, he wants to come back. So based upon noon, and he's gonna hit this before it's enacted, so he'll fly under the radar screen. But if that comes up again, something like it. So he would not be able to talk because it would not be an agenda item. My guess is this fella, knowing him, would probably request that it become an agenda item.
But he will have, there are agendas that he could, that it is relevant to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because every single time the board meets between now and the time they.
Yeah, that's true on superintendents.
Yeah, so he'll have opportunities to address the board on the superintendent search, because it will be on the agenda.
True.
Um,
Okay.
Not to say that there aren't folks on something else that it's not gonna be an agenda item anytime soon, who have expected.
Okay.
But you know, in the past, that has, the most common topic has been personnel. Items that are not really appropriate for public comment.
Correct.
And we're still educating them on the routes that they have to get their voice heard, right?
That's correct.
Which does go back to the conversation y'all had last month about putting more information on your homepage about that,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
about public about.
Very user-friendly, how that works.
I'd like to suggest, Chair, is that go on and, because this is one we're gonna come back to, because we're gonna have to do the policy on it.
It's further, it's in here later on.
Yeah, it's page 5.
So I would go on through your SOP, put in your changes that you want, and then come back and do
We'll come back
policy.
and
'Cause we
address
do
that here in
both
just a
back and
moment.
forth. I think it's
Okay.
gonna take you a long time.
Okay, all right. Let's see, page 4, under quorum. It says, generally, anytime 4 or more members are gathered and/or discuss board business. Is it and or is it or? I mean, are there two elements to
Probably
that, or
just
is there
and.
one?
Probably just and. I don't know why there would be an or. And that's lifted straight off one of those other manuals.
I mean, are there two, Angela, are there two elements there to that?
Is this the new definition, do you think?
The walking quorum one is
Is
below
new,
that.
okay.
The first sentence was picked
The
off of
first one, okay.
another manual.
I wanted to clarify that,
And discuss.
because if it's and or, I mean, that makes a big,
It's just and.
it's
I
just
think
and,
so,
right?
too. I
It should
agree.
not be or.
Okay, done.
So we remove the or, and then we have a reference to BE legal. And then walking quorum, is that the definition?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
That should be the new one.
Mhm.
There was a Supreme Court.
Right. So, should we reference anything there, or just leave it as
It's
is?
just the definition.
Okay, all right. So we're gonna remove the or.
Here, Angela,
Hey, while you're
Dan,
ripping
I'll
through,
share.
can we get back up to the one that's in between page 3 and 4? Or you
Yes.
want to rip through all yours first? Or?
No, we can do it if we go.
Yeah, so we've got some language that's in here sort of in triplicate, actually.
Yes, we do.
So the last bullet on page 3, and then the first bullet underneath, on page 4, underneath board member request for information, not on the agenda. And then again, down on page 5, under board members request for information, like that language is actually in here 3 times.
Okay.
And so just, I should come with a suggestion for how to improve that. I didn't get that far into
I mean,
it.
I saw
but
that. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
I'd like to clean it up, then we
Well,
have it in there
let's
once
look
if
at
we
it
can.
now, if you don't mind, so I
Yeah.
can take back what you wish. We're on page 3 in the board operating. Board president, superintendent jointly create agenda, I'm on 3, 2 standing agenda items will be in, questions that concern non-agenda items will be addressed when appropriate, administrative report to the superintendent. So that's first one. Okay, Chris, the other one was
So at the top of page 4, board member request for information not on the agenda.
Okay,
Right, we essentially have that same bullet that you just read again.
true.
Or maybe placed on a future board meeting agenda, right? So,
The only difference is that last bullet then,
Yeah.
and really it kind of says the same thing. Updates will be provided as needed by the superintendent, and they just listed by courier, email, or postal mail. They became more specific. Board members will notify superintendent when answers to their questions are not forthcoming from the contact person in the time promised. So obviously that district had trouble with that. We can take off, or we can add the courier, email, or postal mail if you so choose. I don't know that you need to get that specific, I'll be really
Right.
candid. I mean, as long as you get the information, administrative report, how it's sent,
right.
you know. Do you wish to add that last sentence? Board members will notify the superintendent when answers to their questions are not forthcoming?
Now you've lost me. Where are you?
Page 4.
The last point under before quorum, the last point before quorum.
Okay, gotcha. It's like my finger's right on it. Yeah, and this is that the same? Right, and that really goes down under board member requests for information, right? These all kind of overlap.
Correct, what I was saying,
Yeah,
Chris.
so what if we take out the first 2 bullets under
Correct.
board member requests for information not
They're
on the
not.
agenda because they're
They're
handled
not.
up top,
Mhm.
right? But then that 3rd bullet, we roll that down and make sure that it's covered under the board member request for information down below.
That was my question.
Okay.
So.
Oh, yeah, and it's already there. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
duplicate. Yeah, so just strike that whole section on page 4 then.
Well, my question was the last sentence on that section, Chris. Board members will notify superintendent when answers to their questions are not forthcoming. That is not included on the first one. Do you wish to add that, is my question? That
Well,
very,
so
very
we've-
last sentence.
So we've actually got it on page 5.
Okay.
So it's already there.
Okay,
Yes.
So, yeah, so I think we've got it covered between the 2 spaces, so we just strike that whole board member request for information not on the agenda section altogether.
done. Okay, and then on page 5. So the one that you want to keep is the one on page 5.
I think so, yeah.
Okay, and then take out the other 2.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're staying with that?
Yeah, taking out the repeats.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, in the
Sure.
spirit of this, which is really what this document is, right? It kind of
Right.
sets the spirit of what we're trying to get to,
Right.
right? I mean,
That's right.
And we want to make it clear.
Got it.
okay. All right, sorry. Back to you, sir.
All right, sir. Page 4. On the consent agenda, I didn't see anything in there. One suggestion that I thought I would make, let me see what note I have here to myself.
One thing I didn't care for on consent agenda, second sentence, the board president and superintendent are encouraged to make a liberal use of the consent agenda, and personally, I don't care for that because I think their law is if there are items of interest to the public that they
Right.
should be very specific, and I think when you take a liberal use of that, that kind of
Right.
negates that.
I actually agree with you. Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
So we'll just take out that one
Strike that
sentence.
sentence.
Yeah,
Strike the
Yeah.
sentence.
leave the rest.
And then the only minor addition I have was on number 8, just adding an S in parentheses after city, since we do have 3 cities involved in what's going on.
Unique.
Yeah.
And then obviously where it says board member response and public participation, Angela, that's where we'll have to change it.
This is the one we're going to have to come back to.
Mm-hmm.
At least the first bullet. The others are fine.
Board member request for information, the last bullet point. I guess, Angela, this is a question for you. Is a legitimate educational interest, is that defined somewhere?
It is.
Okay.
You want to say as defined by board
Yes.
policy?
Right. That was my question to myself, is where is that defined?
It's FL. You want board policy FL?
Yes. Page 6 at the top, I think that should be directly to campus principals instead of directory. And I don't know if I ever, I don't recall receiving a list of board contacts, you know, if,
Like to campuses?
yes, I mean, who I'm supposed to contact if I want to go visit this campus. I mean,
Well, we got the phone.
Logically, it's
we got
the-
the directory. But
right. I just say
Yeah.
that because it's mentioned here.
But here it's asking like issue a formal information request directly to a board contact. So you were never given my name as somebody. Is that what you're saying? Like,
Yeah,
if you wanted
right.
to informally ask me something, you never were given the list of who you could ask.
Correct.
And I think,
It all went to the superintendent.
correct. And that's a decision point for you all, and I'll give you a preference, and y'all can shoot it down. But, I think your requests need to go through your superintendent. You don't want to get in a position where someone else knows something and someone else knows something and your superintendent does not. And I don't think it would be nefarious. I think it just kind of happens. It sets up bad mojo. So especially coming in with a new superintendent, I think you float to the superintendent. They can give it to someone else. I mean, that would be appropriate. And that person can respond back to the board member with the CC to the suit. But I think that just ensures that you've got those lines of communication that are really, really clean.
I know there have been cases where I've sent you a message, but copied the superintendent.
Right.
Yeah.
Or there
Knowing
are
when it was-
cases
yeah.
when you've contacted Susan and she said, just call Deanna. And then she said,
And that's fine, but that's different.
but that's
Yeah.
different.
Right.
Yeah, that's different, because with that, then she was in the driver's seat, and she needed to be in the driver's seat.
Yeah.
But, Chris, I would say, going back to what you said, and thank you for being really honest with
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
I would encourage y'all, again, to flow through your superintendent.
Right.
And if the superintendent doesn't get that information back to you, then you've got a matter between you and your superintendent.
Yeah.
But that's their job. Their job is to make sure you get that information. They're not gonna know everything, so they're gonna certainly use the people around them.
Yeah.
But your new person, especially the new
Right.
person, that's really important.
So if you were going to put that in the positive, wouldn't you just want to say board members shall make all information requests directly to the superintendent?
Yeah, yes, that is the positive. And then you may want to add, superintendent may direct board members to whoever is in the know in the school district, and I think you need to add
Well,
that. but-
that first bullet point implies that, first of all, we know who all the board contacts are, but do you know?
I mean, I was assumed it was.
Yeah, you
the
made an
next level
assumption.
down. Right, I made an assumption.
Right.
Right.
You did,
But
logically, you went,
yes, but I always copied this.
right.
Susan. If I did that. And I never did it if it's something serious, then I only went to her.
So what's the
Yeah.
suggestion on that? Rosie, do you have a preference either way?
I actually agree that it should be clarified, because I do
Right.
think the point that you were making, that sometimes Susan would say, hey, just call this person, it got easy then to just call that person and not go back to Susan. It wasn't out of disrespect or
No.
anything, it was just kind of like, oh, she's busy, I know who knows the answer. Not rudely, you know what I'm saying. So I think taking out board contacts and just keeping the streamline is a great idea.
Especially, again, with the new person coming in.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then that last bullet point, the question I had in my mind was, board members will keep the superintendent informed, and my question was about what?
Your question.
Questions, comments, concerns, complaints in the
Yeah.
community?
Yeah.
I mean,
Does
anything
that-
under the sun.
Right, does that need any
Yeah.
clarification?
I don't think
I don't know.
Okay.
But I can rest assured I'm not going to be faxing you anything.
But I also think if you just say superintendent, then the community sees that it's our job to listen to them, but to communicate with the superintendent. And it starts to take out that gray blur that people don't understand. They think that we
I agree with you.
can do so much.
Okay, so what I've done, the
We're good.
first one is, board members shall make formal information requests directly to the superintendent. The superintendent may designate administrators to respond.
That's good.
Okay.
I think that takes care of that.
Okay.
Should you say on that last one, board members will keep the superintendent informed through verbal or written communication and like take out, like who
Yeah,
faxes anybody?
I agree.
I'm just,
I mean, it gives you a choice.
I need your
but-
fax number, by the
could you
way.
fax me that?
I would just put a period after informed.
Yeah.
Well, that'd be fine too.
Yeah.
I just maybe try to
Appropriate communication method.
update the language a little.
Yeah.
And I'm not so sure about bullet 3. If the request requires a material amount of time or resources, the superintendent will ask the full board for authorization. I'm not sure
I don't know what that means.
how that looks.
Well, what it means is
and
it's
I
going to be
don't know
delayed
what-
for a month.
Well, what it
Which
means
may
is
not be the right answer.
Is if you get a board member, and I've had this, that is a rogue, and they are requesting lots and lots and lots of information all the time, and that's all you're doing, then at that point in time, the board needs to know that it's taking this amount of time. Do you still want me to produce this? Or that superintendent to produce that?
I just don't know that the board has the authority to tell another board member they're not entitled to information. I
Right.
think that's
I think they can-
dictated by policy.
I think they can counsel with that one. I don't know if they can dictate, no. I mean, they can censor, I guess, at times. But there needs to be something in here about that, because this has happened in other districts, and I've been a party to that.
Which is why.
Well, the board would
That's
be,
right.
the board would be authorizing the release of the information
I think there's
for another
legal
board member?
policy that addresses board member requests for information.
I mean, if you were going to ask,
It's,
you know, Calvin, something that's going to take him 3 weeks to put together, right, where he's not doing something that's strategic for the district, right? I mean, that's what we're talking about.
Okay.
Well-
What's the board gonna be authorizing is my question.
Well, maybe you just do this. Maybe you put the superintendent shall notify the board president. And then the board president can determine whether or not that is something to talk about with that other board member or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, because that to me looks, well, it becomes an agenda item, and now you're voting on,
Right.
Point
I
of
mean,
shaming the board member.
I wanna get away from that. I
Yeah.
mean,
Well, maybe they need it.
Well, but that's not,
But I do
that
want
is
to
not good for
protect
team
your,
building.
I know.
but I do want to protect your superintendent if that would occur in the
Yeah.
future, because that can happen.
Angela, you
I
were
think
nodding
referring
your
that to the
head.
president is
You were,
reasonable.
you were nodding your head about that, my last comment?
well, right, when you said, then what is the action item look like?
Right, we're gonna-
Because
we're gonna put it on the
authorization
agenda.
implies some board
Yeah,
action.
yeah.
Right, and then we gotta vote.
Yeah.
Well,
Right.
maybe seek guidance from the
Right.
board president.
I think that's better.
Yeah.
But I would say if any of us are causing problems, it should go to the board president first.
Right, and I think that's in
Right.
here as well. We
Yeah.
addressed that in here.
Okay.
Mental
Chris, if
note,
you're
I'm
out of
expecting a
control-
phone call.
And
Chris is
honestly,
out of
you know, it wasn't the single report requiring
Get
2
to
or
the
3
customers.
weeks. It was requesting every week for something that went all year long.
Yeah.
That took hours and hours and hours and hours.
Well, that's, I mean, that's
It
not,
happens.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's not
Just
efficiency, that's.
All right. Refer to the
chaos.
president.
Yeah, okay,
Yep.
check.
Okay, so anything else about that section before we go to closed sessions?
No.
Now, closed sessions, I had one note to myself, let's see. All right, the next to the last bullet point says, no board member shall participate in a closed meeting knowing that neither a certified agenda nor a tape recording of the closed meeting is being made. Does the law say that you can do a certified agenda or record it, or you have to do both?
Either or.
Okay, so,
Because we don't,
I'm
I
not
don't
sure
think we
that
tape
that's-
ours.
right.
You don't take
Right.
them, but.
But we have a certified agenda.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Is
you
that
have to
clear?
have one or the other.
Is that clear?
But neither and nor a.
Which one are you, which bullet are you?
The next to the last bullet
Oh,
point.
okay.
It's a double negative.
Certified agenda.
Right, so my question myself was, is it either
So you
or
could
or
say,
both?
board members shall not participate in a closed meeting that is not being
Mhm.
recorded either. That is
Without
not-
knowledge of a certified agenda or tape recording.
Without not, with, oh,
That is not recorded
and
through.
just make it positive,
Yeah,
and just make it
through-
a positive sentence.
Yeah, because to
a
me,
certified
this is,
agenda or tape.
is it either or,
Shall not participate in a closed meeting knowing that no certified agenda or tape recording
was
is
made?
being made
Okay,
at the closed meeting. It's just make it from the negative.
right, we can do, it's either or, okay.
I got it.
That's the only thing I saw there. Anything else?
I'm with you, man. I would
Okay.
add the same thing.
Okay. Board elections or appointments. And we need to discuss that with policy down at that last,
Yeah, I wasn't following what we had in there, but I
Yeah.
assume that we'll talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This was one that it was not well done in the cut and copy from, I forget which city or which school district it was. So this one just, we need to make sure it aligns with policy, Angela. Because there's a restriction, if it's less than a year, they can, I think, appoint or something like that. And I don't have all that in my head. But it's all spelled out. We just need to make sure this hits it.
Okay.
It won't be a decision point for y'all because it's in policy now.
okay.
But it just needs to pick up that language.
On the evaluation of the board, the only well, did we do that last year?
It's,
We
didn't
did
do
it during the training.
Yeah, we did in the training, but,
Yeah, we've done it in the last two trainings.
okay.
What's your evaluation like? Obviously not memorable.
Well, it's very, well, yeah, actually, the only reason I'm saying that is because I raised that point, I don't know, a meeting or two ago.
You did, you
And-
did.
And then we had came to the realization that the conversation we had at the beginning of the board training actually was the board evaluation, right? Where we kind of looked at the menu and said, okay, here's some things specifically
Okay.
that we
Oh,
think we
yeah.
need some.
So that,
Focus on,
we didn't
yeah.
call it
That's
a
when you
board
sign that
evaluation.
little-
Right,
thingy.
exactly,
Yeah.
right? So
Okay.
it didn't immediately jump out to me as that, but.
And I've only been through one.
Right.
Was it a checklist or
We did one
discussion?
like in that September board training when we first got on, and
Yeah.
we did it when we
Right.
posted the things
Right,
on the
right,
window.
right,
I got you.
I don't have my other bag with me,
Yeah.
otherwise I'd pull it out.
It's that-
But,
That
things
form
that-
that you have to sign.
You know, the things that y'all
Right.
need to make sure that you do annually is a review, annually, one is a review of this, because that's part of your SOP. You need to do your evaluation ours annually. And then there are those training hours that there's 5 for returners and then there's 10 for the newbies, but those are things that need to occur every year. So you as policy committee coming out of this year, you know, just get you a timeline in your head of when those things should occur. Oh, goal setting should be part of that too. And you should be reviewing your vision and mission statement every year as well. So if you want to do that, you know, what y'all may want to do is use your policy committee to do that initial review and then bring it to the board, just again to kind of expedite that flow. If that's what you wish to do, then September is your time frame. You know, this committee every year, that's what you're going to do. So you might want to put a tick file in your head of that, so it gets done every year.
What did you guys do, I know we did in September, what did you do like in 2018, let's say? What did y'all do in terms of self-evaluation? You remember?
we did the same thing.
Same thing?
Mhm.
Okay.
And y'all did that when?
This year we did it, when you, weren't you didn't you come to the beginning of that meeting?
Oh,
Yeah.
was?
Started
No,
in
you were there. When the TASB rep was here.
No, September.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. I think the time before, we actually did it at the conference.
No, we did it when Manuel and I just got on, we did it in this room.
Did we?
And that person came and we had to talk about memories of school. What, remember?
Yep,
that?
absolutely. Yep. I got you. I'm with you.
it's required, when they come to do the team building, it's required that they do that they
I
have
just,
to
you
do a
don't think about it as an
Okay.
evaluation.
So the team
Yeah,
building, it was the
that's- I
team
didn't
building,
either.
and it's incorporated in that.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, because this, if you remember that 11 by 17 sheet of paper that they give
That's
you.
exactly
Yeah.
what I was talking about.
That's it.
There you go.
Mhm.
There you go.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think you
I've
certified.
done it. I've done it before.
Right.
I'm on the TASB list.
So you can do that?
You can apply to.
Yeah, I know you can. That's a nice advantage for you guys. Because if she can get you the hours, you can tailor-make that baby however you want to make it. So if you want to make it something that's very specific and unique to BISD and what you want to do, you can do that.
Wow.
So you got an ace in the hole.
So I've done
Man.
that before when we did years ago.
And y'all may really want to consider that. Yeah, this year was so much getting ready for your new superintendent coming in. And you won't have that as kind of the goal, hope, for next year, for several years. So you really may want to think about what would you like to do for your annual goal setting and evaluation and team building. And you might want to do something very unique and special.
Now, the evaluation of superintendent, it's in here that says it's done in February. When is the evaluation of the board done? I mean, it's annually, so
It's been in September, quite honestly.
it's any time during the course of the year.
Right. Doesn't specify. Now, y'all can put it in this is SOP, you can do what you want. So if you want to specify, you can.
Okay.
But it wasn't always in September, was it, Angela?
It's moved around a little. September, October.
It's always
from
been in the
August to
fall,
October.
though.
It always has been in the
It's
fall.
always-
Usually
I
after
feel like
the
it's always
start of
been in the
school.
fall.
Mhm.
But it doesn't have to be. I mean,
You just need to make sure that
I feel like it's a good
it's
kickstart
useful.
into the year, right? Like, let's everybody take a look at ourselves and.
What was the lady's name that came and spoke to us? The very first one.
Oh, okay.
Was it Kay? And then she spoke at one of the TASB. I don't remember which one it was.
Yeah, it was Kay.
She's funny.
Yeah, she's good.
It's funny you
Yeah.
mention that now, it's all come back to me.
I learned a lot that evening from her.
Depends on who you get, always. But do make that a time that's beneficial to you, not just checking off the blank.
Evaluation of superintendent. Robin, I know that you said that you had preferred that it be done
In open.
in open session.
Yeah, and it is you can't demand it one way or the other as a board. You can't demand
It's
it
a
being closed or open.
superintendent's
Just like
privilege.
anything else, just like anybody else.
It's in the contract.
It's in the contract, yeah, okay. So I'm not sure there's anything we need to change here.
The one thing that I do suggest to you, and this is a talking point, because this is very different, is most boards generally come to a board meeting and everybody goes into closed session and the superintendent dreads it for a month or 6 weeks and their stomach's turning and they sit there and then whatever happens, happens, and if it's brutal, it's brutal, and then you get to, lick your wounds for a week thereafter. We started in Temple with Steve Wright. Before that board meeting, he would compile it just like I'm sure what you guys do. But he would go through that with me, just he and I, before that board meeting. And I'll tell you, it took all of the angst out of that document and that time of the year where it allowed me to be a better superintendent. So I really suggest to y'all, and that's what y'all have asked me to do, that y'all consider something like that for the sake of your superintendent, because it's hard to sit in front of 7 people and have them all go for it. I mean, it's really difficult, and no one knows unless they have sat in the chair and been the recipient. And I'm talking about whether it's a good appraisal or a bad appraisal, but if you can have a heads up on something and really talk with that board president about what's going on and what the intent of that was and really work through it, it becomes a really beneficial time, and it's a time that you can really move forward with.
So what you like is for the board president to just discuss it with each individual board member and then get their input.
Or you send it in to the board president. That's what most boards do. And they compile all the comments and suggestions, and if there's a Likert scale, 1 through 5 or whatever else, they'll do an average, and then, that's on your document. So the only difference was that was done, I got a preview of that before that board meeting. And then when we got the board meeting, that's why I didn't go into closed sessions, because I knew what was on it, and I knew what I needed to do, and I didn't need to go into closed session at one time, go for it, talk about it publicly.
What's the rationale behind February?
That's just what BISD's done.
Do you remember, Angela, what the rationale?
Yes.
Because you've got a semester behind you and you've got a semester ahead of you.
Because y'all have always set you've evaluated the superintendent first, before any of the other administrative employees, and you've set the goals at the outset, and from that, everything else flowed. And so then, and the biggest thing my memory is that a lot of times y'all would set a list of, you would establish the priorities for the district.
Right.
And that's what the superintendent would use to draft the district improvement plan, which that work starts in March. And from the district improvement plan, all the campus improvement plans are generated. And so by you evaluating the superintendent in February and establishing the priorities for the district early in the year, that gives the superintendent time to incorporate all of that into the district's plan, which then informs the campus plan, which then allows all of the evaluations and administrators that follow. So the superintendent's first, and then March is when recommendations are for evaluations for administrators. And all other administrators are evaluated in January as
So
well.
it trickles down.
Yeah,
So
everything trickles down.
you give the superintendent the goals in February, then we would get our goals in March from those goals, then we would give our people those goals, and it would go into the district plan. And then what was prepared for you, because I've helped prepare that document to give to you for that evaluation, was all the work that was done, not school year, but calendar year. So from January to December of the year before, anything that had been done was, I believe, put in that document.
The other reason for the time frame, whether it's January or February, doesn't really matter, but I'll give you March. But is you don't want the superintendent's contract to the perception that that person is held hostage, that they will either renew or non-renew someone else. And so if you do them separated apart and you do them first, then truly the rest of the appraisals and things are on their own. They have, that person's contract has nothing to do with these others.
Okay. There's two question marks there, the second bullet point. Should that say regularly scheduled board meeting in March?
No, the reason I put the question marks is because of the very last piece of that the board president would review that prior to the next regularly scheduled board meeting. I don't know if that's something that you wish to do or not.
Okay.
I think we should.
I thought we had been
I thought so
doing
too.
that.
Oh, no, it wasn't in this document. I
It
don't know.
wasn't in the document. Okay.
But I think that was what was done.
Got it. Got it.
I guess what we did last time, but.
Yeah.
Okay.
Should we say in March or? I mean-
No, because actually that meeting's always in January.
Oh, that's right,
That
yeah.
evaluation
Yeah.
meeting's always in January.
That's
And
right.
then I think the agenda item must be at the February meeting.
Mhm.
Oh, Connie
Well,
just said
that
February.
needs to be.
All right, well, then we probably need to
said
clarify
differently
that. 'cause-
Yeah.
So we're gonna evaluate the superintendent in January so that it can be an agenda item on the February
Right.
meeting.
I think that's what you've been doing.
Okay.
So we need to say January.
The superintendent
Is that right?
evaluation will occur in January.
I know
Connie
that
said
evaluation meetings are usually in January. Doesn't that feel like it's usually in January?
Connie said it was February.
I think you're right,
That's
though.
right, about
I think
February.
that we've already, we vote on the superintendent stuff in February.
Yeah, but you've had them
The meeting is
evaluation
in
meeting
January.
earlier.
Yeah, I think that's correct. That's
Okay,
correct.
so annual evaluation superintendent will be done in January.
January.
And then
There's,
the contract renewal would be in February. Is that
Mhm,
correct?
mhm.
Okay.
you don't think it's necessary to put anything about the regular scheduled meeting? Just leave it as is?
It's the next one.
Yeah,
That's
next one.
not,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, if somehow we have the next one at the end of February, then we're good.
Anything on selection of board officers or meeting?
Yeah, so that second sentence
Second
there, I mean, that to me kind of looks like term limits, right, for the officers, right? Which is what I don't believe we've had that in the past. I mean, clearly we haven't. had
No,
that
we
in the
haven't.
past.
I mean, no.
So the question is, do we intend to implement that? I mean, that feels like a significant change.
Yeah, because we've had officers in the past, I mean, I hadn't been on here very long, but it seems like there were officers that were on for a a lot longer than 3 terms.
Right.
I think we should keep it.
Keep the term limit in there?
And follow it. Just
I
saying,
do.
did not pass this.
So from a stability standpoint, where should I start? 3 consecutive terms, so basically 3 years, so,
Your board president could change every 3 years.
right.
I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing.
Board officers shall serve for.
But it may also not be a good thing.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, ma'am.
I think from a community standpoint, seeing that we are willing and that we trust our board and really that anybody on the board should be the president
Yeah.
is not a bad thing. We don't
Sure
give
can.
that person that
Yeah.
false sense of power, which we're not worried about currently.
All right, what do you think? Or is that a question, or should I not be asking that question?
First of all, Angela, is there anything in policy on term limits or anything like that?
Is it 3 or 5 or 4? Is it the
Right.
number 3 that seems too short and you change that?
It seems like it could be, right?
So you change that to maybe 4 or 5, but I do agree, like, you don't, it's helpful to have,
Yeah, no, I get that. But we also, the rest of us who aren't the president also do have some control through the annual election.
but it forces somebody else to
Right, it
step
does
up and
force
take
somebody
the
else to
role.
step up.
So if you have, everyone is complacent and nobody
Yeah.
else wants to take it, this forces somebody else to take the role.
Mhm.
I
Because
think
of-
timing's the issue.
Yeah.
Because when you dictate the number of years, the timing may be bad. It may be
Have 4 new board members.
divided
come
up
in
bond, or you have brand new board, yeah, you've got a complete turnover, 4 new board members all at once. And
Oh,
so
that's
the
true.
timing might be bad. But maybe you can serve the same, and this is all, your board doesn't have to follow this anyway.
Well,
But
if
it
we don't
may
intend to
be-
follow it, we shouldn't put it in there.
Yeah,
Right.
well, I'm just saying. Just saying they don't, I mean, technically you get 4 people who don't want to do it,
Right.
then they're not going to, but you could put something that discourages officers from extending terms beyond 3 years, rather than a statement. Y'all could say that we encourage officers to rotate.
Yeah, because if you have someone that doesn't want to be the board president, what do you do in that situation?
And you will encounter that. And, some districts automatically rotate every year. And then really the board president becomes just a figurehead rather than someone who takes on the responsibilities and duties of it. So I think there's
It'd be a
certainly a
challenge if we
hybrid.
had 4 new board members.
Yeah. Well, so, I
You're
mean,
on a 4-3.
so from a superintendent standpoint, right? I mean, new president comes in, I would imagine there's some time to, feel each other out, learn what's going on, and kind of develop that relationship. And so turning it over every year doesn't seem to make sense
No,
from
it
that
doesn't.
standpoint.
It's more difficult. Again, Angela said earlier, I'm devil's
Yeah.
advocate. You get a board president that's difficult, you may go Yahoo. So, I mean, you've got a flip
Yeah.
side to everything.
That's where I think 3 years is reasonable.
Yeah.
I do think though, if the timing ended up bad and you happened to be in a year where you had 4 new board members for whatever reason,
Right.
and that's happened, then you might not have anybody, because the other caveat is you have to have been completed a year of service prior to being
Right.
officer.
Could you
Right.
put, going back to what Angela
But
said,
I
officers are encouraged to, and we can tweak the language, to not serve more than 3 consecutive terms.
It sounds like it's effectively the same thing.
Well,
Without.
you're not
I mean,
forcing it.
well, right.
And you can even add to that, unless there is an extenuating circumstance, because there very well may be. If you
You're
want to
not
put more
feeling it.
starch in it, you can.
Well, it doesn't matter. I mean,
Well, no, it does matter.
no, I mean, I can be flexible on it. I think I've just seen the other side and how there, and I was on the board when there was no choice. So, sorry. So, to me, this just feels like a great
Yeah.
safety
Protection.
net.
I mean, I like
But-
the extenuating circumstance.
Yeah.
But remember,
But
you're
I
gonna
can
take this
be
back to the
flexible.
board too.
Yeah.
You know, they may shoot down your recommendations, and that's why you start. You give them something to begin with.
Right.
So, you know, put in what you all have as a consensus, because this is not a voting membership. And take it to the board and see what they do with it. So do y'all
I mean,
wanna,
I get the stalemate, you know, people get stale in position or perhaps get too comfortable and, you know.
Everybody does.
Yeah,
If you have one person who's.
right.
Or three
I mean, I
people
c-
who've always done it,
Yeah.
the board doesn't turn over for many years at a time, then everybody gets comfortable.
I mean, I could go with the 3-year language as long as we've got like the extenuating circumstance piece in there, right? Because it spurs the conversation, right? You know, so I
Okay.
see that.
well,
Let's
it'd
see what
be
everybody
still-
says. It'd be an interesting conversation. The larger group.
It will.
Yeah, that's the first one. I mean, I think the other recommendations we're making are, I'm not
Yeah.
sure we're gonna get a whole lot of discussion about it, but this one I think we need to really
The
address.
beauty of an SOP is, even though you don't have to follow it, if you get a new board member in and that person really is struggling, and I'm being very nice when I say really struggling with their role as a board member, you can fall back on your SOP, and it does give you some validity in saying, this is how we operate with that new person. So even though it is not policy, it certainly reflects policy, it doesn't break policy, but it does give you something to go in with and help that person, help the board, help the school district. Okay, so.
Even if there was I mean, if it was a huge turnover, if there were 4 people that
Mhm.
left, I mean, somebody's gonna step in as president no matter what, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Me too.
I'm not sure, I mean, the term limit, I mean, from a political standpoint, I think it's a good thing.
I don't know if 3's the right number, but you know.
I
That's
like
pretty
the
good.
extenuating circumstance.
Yeah.
So I mean,
Okay.
Okay.
Well,
Well,
the
we're gonna
superintendent's
fly and see what
contract
they do
is
with
3
it.
years. So it matches that.
What's that now?
Your superintendent's contract. is
Assuming we
3
started
years.
both at the same time.
Well, I'm just
Yeah,
saying, no,
yeah.
I mean, you've already picked that number.
Yeah.
Usually, that's a standard number for,
Yeah.
so,
All right, we'll roll with it.
Well, again, you're gonna have another
Just
layer
trying to
of
find
approval on this.
comparison.
Yeah.
So give it to the board and see what they do with
Yeah.
it.
What'd you say? You said about the,
well, he was saying, I'm not sure if 3 years is the right number, and I just made the comment that a superintendent you typically contract with for 3 years. And so you kind of limit a board president to 3
No, I
years,
gotcha.
and so there's a, I don't
Some
know.
precedent.
Yeah. All right.
I think there's more pros than cons to the limits, personally.
All right. Next item.
I do too. I don't know what your board would do, so. okay.
All right. Meeting minutes, I didn't see anything in there of any significance. Board committees, seems to be working good. This is our 3rd meeting. I think everyone else is good with it. Communication.
And this was picked straight off one of those documents that y'all like.
Right. Let's see, the 4th bullet point, just didn't seem to flow to me.
And honestly, it seems like common sense to me. Like, why would you need to even put that bullet in there?
Right.
Right, but. Because clearly whoever wrote that bullet had an issue at some point.
And that's true with everything that's in here. You know,
Right.
someone had an
I
issue
mean,
with something
somebody had an
somewhere. So,
Yeah.
you know, it's interesting reading through them because you could really see a lot
Yeah.
about the school
I mean,
district.
like, I gotta give the superintendent the benefit of the doubt,
Yeah.
right? I mean, for crying out loud.
You
I
would
mean,
hope.
Do y'all want to remove
let's
that
just-
four
yes,
then?
that's-
You wanna strike the bullet?
Yep.
Yeah, I didn't.
Kill it.
Agree.
I'd like to think we're not gonna have that
Angela, what
problem.
do you
And if it
think?
does, it's a performance problem with the
Agree.
That's a
superintendent.
totally different issue, right?
Right.
Let's see, board member communication with the media. The last bullet point says, remind the media representatives of the position or the action of the board. I guess it should be trustees on the issue in questions. I like that language better as opposed to trustee related to.
I think we've used board member all the way through the document. though.
Right.
Okay.
So just from a consistency standpoint.
Right.
Where's the word trustee at? Me? Oh, I see.
Well, that one is talking about the board as a whole. Or the action of the board on the issue in question. Remind the media representative of the position or the action of the board
Mhm.
on the issue in question.
Mhm.
The Board of Trustees.
I'm gonna take out that trustee. That's the same.
Just say board, of the board,
Mhm.
Okay.
on the issue in question. Board dissension. Okay, Chris, what you got on that one?
Wow.
This is important.
Apparently I need to do some self-searching.
I didn't say anything.
I mean, when I read it, I didn't have any issue with it.
Whatever you do with it, I don't know, but it is an important section. A lot of people avoid it like the plague, but it is important.
I mean, nothing jumped out at me. I
No.
didn't write any
There
comments when I
either.
read through it.
The second bullet needs a 2 with respect to the board business items.
I mean, there was a case of this relatively recently. I think we did handle it amongst ourselves. I mean, I'm fine with all 4 of these.
That last sentence, I guess we should put an A in there. If the issue is not resolved during a closed meeting. Yeah, what did you say again?
Oh, on that second bullet, I just said with respect to the board business items. There's a missing word.
Yes,
Yeah.
correct.
Right.
Rosie, anything else on that one?
Escalation is
another
working
way.
amongst yourselves. Take it to the president, take it to a closed
Poor
meeting.
Angela.
In the event instead of if the event.
Last step is taking it back. I don't know.
Whoop it out.
Yeah, there's an in the event somewhere.
I mean, I think it lays out the framework for the escalation, right? So.
Yeah, instead of it should be in the event, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and I don't know that it's in compliance with the Open Meeting Act to take disputes between board members into a closed
It's a
meeting.
good question.
Is that considered a personnel issue?
Well, we're not personnel.
Let's check on that.
No.
That's a good question.
It's not, the only exception for personnel is if you're discussing, board officers and you're discussing the duties and responsibilities of the board officers and who has an interest in those positions, you can discuss that in closed session, but, board members arguing is not a closed session
Item.
item.
We're arguing
In general.
about a board business. at all? I mean,
No, it would depend on whether it's something else appropriate for closed session.
So we need to take.
I'm
the
thinking of
last
just
two sentences
addressing
out.
the personality aspect of it, not the business aspect of it.
Yeah, it could be appropriate if you're
Yeah.
arguing about
A specific
a
something.
specific something that's an exception to the rule, but if it's an argument or, we're just gonna, we're gonna force board members to engage in a
We put the issue.
intervention in a closed session.
The issue may be presented to the board for resolution in closed session if
If the
item
issue is,
falls under
the,
Mhm.
Acceptable.
Yeah, under acceptable closed meeting topics. Okay. Got it?
Angela, you okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay, good catch.
The citizen request section, the second bullet point and the last bullet point on page 9, I thought,
Yeah, they're all redundant.
right, a bit redundant.
Yeah.
We'll just take out 2 because we just went through that it needs to all go through the superintendent, so being consistent.
So second bullet point's out.
Okay.
but that, I thought that number 2 is if you hear a complaint by somebody, like a parent or citizen, it goes to the appropriate administrator, so you need to send them back to the principal.
Oh, that is true. That is true.
Because that's
That
the
means
one
something
we talked
different.
about.
Yeah, of course, we need to make it clear though.
Or is
I
a
agree.
citizen
I think referring the
request?
citizen to the appropriate administrator, I mean, the way I read it is what you just said.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
we saw it differently, and I'm the one that has typed a lot of this in, so it does need some clarity though.
So as a citizen, a parent, is this all of, I mean, encompasses parent, teacher,
Mm-hmm.
whoever you are, then this is the one where we looked at
Georgetown around.
Round Rock, and it outlines specifically,
For the website.
right.
I want to say this came from that, but I will go back and look. I think we pulled it straight off of that one.
It's really referring the citizen to
Yeah.
the appropriate escalation path.
I mean, we could
right?
say in number 2, the board member shall then refer the citizen to the appropriate administrator and notify the superintendent as soon as possible of the request or complaint.
That's clear. I like that.
Just make it one sentence in
I
number
like
2.
that.
If a parent has a problem with Susie, their child Susie, and hasn't talked to their teacher yet, their kid's teacher yet, do you really, like, the superintendent need to know about that?
Well, you're referring that person to
Yeah.
But
To the
you're not
administrator.
saying, like, somebody comes, my response is gonna be, well, have you talked to the teacher, right?
And that's appropriate.
Right.
That's what the Round Rock one did. It sent you to the classroom teacher, and then to the principal, and
Right.
then to the district person, and then to the superintendent. And
Follow
if
the
it
hierarchy.
wasn't,
Mhm.
then
How about
it-
it, so the board member shall refer the citizen to the appropriate chain of command, and then something like that, which would be teacher then.
And if it
Chain of
wasn't a
command.
classroom issue, then it
Mhm.
started at the principal level. But if
Mhm.
it was if there was a classroom issue, it went to the,
Right.
When do you notify the superintendent then?
Yeah, I just don't think we need to notify the superintendent, hey, look, I had a conversation on the sidewalk and I referred the parent to go talk to their teacher about something, right? I mean, like, I feel like the superintendent's got more to deal with.
So it means it depends on the gravity of the
Right,
issue.
right,
Okay?
exactly.
So, I mean, of course, that's gonna be, for the board member, that's gonna be a subjective,
Right.
yeah.
And it also becomes an educational moment in the event that they do it incorrectly.
So y'all
Yeah.
do y'all want to take out then, notify the
Well-
superintendent?
Well, Robin, as a superintendent, what do you wanna be notified about? I mean, like Chris says, I mean, if, someone's complaining that teacher did something that is fairly inconsequential.
Right.
Well, if things are rocking and rolling fine, then I don't want to know. I just soon y'all refer them to whoever,
Right.
a teacher usually.
But when do you want to know?
Yeah, but when things aren't rocking and rolling well, and I'm talking about overall with the board,
Right.
then I become much more of a micromanagement person at that point in time. You know, these things are written for worst case scenarios generally. They're not written for best case scenarios. I think, again, you're getting a new superintendent in here, maybe you put in here, then the FYI, and we could put it in some soft language. Board member gives an FYI to the superintendent or something like that. Action is not required, nothing like that, just FYI.
The board member may notify, because it says shall.
Yeah, if you're gonna do it, then you need to do it.
Yeah.
How often are y'all asked things? Is it something that happens every week? I mean, if it's so frequently, then this gets to be a pain if you're notifying the superintendent.
Yeah,
on time.
if you're out in schools and things, I mean, if people get a chance to talk to you,
Right.
something's
talk
gonna
to
come
you.
up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they'll call you.
I make all kinds of unofficial referrals.
You know, I don't want to
Right.
put something in here that is impossible to enforce.
Yeah.
So if it's something that
Yeah.
y'all are gonna get bombarded on and you know that there's no way you're gonna be able to tell that superintendent
Yeah.
all that time, then
Yeah.
I wouldn't put it in here.
Well, maybe we should keep it in line with what I remember being taught when I first started this was you refer them to the appropriate party in the hierarchy.
Right.
So can't we make an organizational chart to the appropriate individual as
Well, no, let's-
specified in the organizational chart? And
We
then-
got it, yeah.
And then,
I mean, isn't that what we're taught? And then
it
what the-
is, but I don't know, I think a lot of people jump it to, I would just go talk to the principal or to the, or a lot of.
I agree.
So-
And that's
so
the
I
reason this
think-
comes up.
I think if you have an organizational chart that we're saying, look, we have done our due diligence, you know, then.
That's why I liked the Round Rock one, and I keep going back to that one because it was so clear and it
Okay.
relieved everyone of the pressure. Because you're out, they hit you, and you go, you know what? You really need to talk to if it's a teacher, you really need to go talk to your principal.
I'll have to go pull it up.
And if it's a
again.
parent,
Yeah.
go talk to the
Right,
teacher or the
right. But
principal.
you can also give them something too. Sometimes people do better with, could you, hey man, I just caught you in the HEB, do you mind sending that to me? Well, if we have an organizational chart or something, we've got something then that we can send that says, look, this is officially what you should be doing.
I'll go back and look at the Round Rock one and see. I think this emulated that one though, but I'll go back and look. And then maybe, and on that second one, Rosie, I'll put the board members shall then refer the citizens to the appropriate administrator on the organizational chart. On that last one, what you may want to do is the board member may notify the superintendent if deemed important.
Good.
Okay.
Angela, any law on that in terms of what you're supposed to do when a citizen comes with you with a complaint? Is there anything we need to worry about?
No. Got it.
Top of page 10,
You could put on that, the bottom that the board will notify the superintendent and then maybe specify out like if there's issues regarding school safety, student
Yeah,
safety,
absolutely.
or, I mean, it's just a thought.
yeah, we covered that too in that, is it fact or rumor?
Yes.
Page 10, the top, I think I just added an A after, board members will not respond to anonymous communications unless the communication pertains to a clear and present criminal health or safety issue. Any such communication pertaining to a
Oh,
criminal
there it is.
health.
That's it.
Chris, Rose, anything else on those two bullet points? Building trust between administration and board. The first bullet point, I added a little bit of language. I said, as much as possible, staff should be made aware of the board or individual board members need to know the question on the agenda item in advance of the board meeting.
Would you read that one more time?
Yeah, let me see, let me make sure I make sense here. As much as possible, staff should be made aware of the board or individual board members' need to know the question on an agenda item in advance of the board meeting.
That's more confusing for me.
Yeah,
That's
that's
more
all.
confusing.
I mean, I know what you're trying to get to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do too.
What about staff should be made aware of board member questions in advance?
That's good.
Wonderful.
Yeah, would you say that one more
Right?
time?
I mean, the goal's no surprise.
Staff
Right, no
should be
surprises.
made aware of board member
And I don't know if it's too much surprise,
questions in advance.
but
of the
a need
board
to
meeting.
prepare a response.
Well, right, because we don't want to string somebody, like have somebody up there who don't know the
Yeah,
answer to the
we want-
question.
yeah,
We
we
want-
want-
like,
We want the information.
it does nothing, no good for us to embarrass somebody by asking them a question that they don't
That's
know the
right.
answer to,
That's
right?
exactly right. Okay, got it. Okay, so what I've got then is, as much as possible, staff should be made aware of board member questions in advance of the board meeting.
Right.
Okay.
I didn't see anything else in there that was... Rose, anything on that? Guidelines for skilled team discussion. I mean, I think all that's good. We did have some discussion on board member visits to campuses before, and I think in one of our, maybe our initial meeting on this. That third bullet point, board members visiting a campus in an unofficial capacity.
I would put just and adhere to campus rules. I don't see why they need to, board members should be different from any other parent. I mean, other parents aren't calling the principal
Right,
when they're on
right.
campus. I just put should adhere to campus rules.
So we're going to say board members visiting the campus should inform the principal and adhere to campus rules, or just
I
adhere?
put board members visiting campus in an unofficial capacity should adhere to campus rules.
Right,
I took out the
okay.
principal because other parents wouldn't do that.
I try to stop in and say hello anyway.
That's fine. We're not saying that you can't do that, Chris.
I didn't see anything else in
Cupcakes
there.
are good too, according to Chip Jennings.
Yeah.
Angela did have a question. Angela did have a question for you on that last bullet point, but anything else? Rosie or Chris? On that last bullet point, Angela, superintendent may schedule group board visits on topics of interest. Any issues regarding notice or?
Well, in accordance with the Open Meetings Act.
Yeah.
I want to
Yeah.
talk about this one because with the new one, this became really weird for us. Because in the past, it just wasn't a big deal. I mean, you schedule it, we posted that we were going out and we're going to do visits. When y'all did the walkthrough of Lake Belton High School,
Right.
that's one. When we did the dual language, that's the other one. We posted, but we didn't do obviously a public forum, and we didn't run, and I'm doing full disclosure, we certainly didn't have a video camera videoing us down the halls either. So, yeah, I don't know on this one, I really don't. I know what the
Well,
law is on it.
And one
But-
of the packets that I reviewed for another school district, they said that, in there they said something to the effect that we will record or videotape if the ability to do that is present wherever we're having the meeting.
You don't have the luxury.
Yeah,
It's
I
called
don't
the
think that's an
law.
option.
Okay. Okay.
So, I don't know if, and this is one I think for our state representatives, I mean, they gave us this law, is I think it really imposes, I understand the law, absolutely, because people were breaking it all over the place, but it imposes upon board members being able to take a tour of a high school, like what y'all did. It prevents, if you want to go out and you want to see a special program, you're not doing any business or anything, you're just going out and seeing the program. But the law is pretty specific, I mean, it's extremely specific right now. So I think this is one that we may have to just not do them. I mean, I'll be really frank, because I don't know a way around it. And even when we did the last one, I mean, I knew that we weren't following the law the way it's written, but, I mean, so I'm gonna talk with Hugh Shine on this one, and I don't know that I'll get direction, but say, you know, you have to understand it's preventing this, and I'm not sure that was your intent.
Yeah. I mean, the way
But
that
isn't it only if there's a quorum?
Yeah, but usually we have quorums
Yeah.
for that kind
Well,
of
so the
stuff.
way that we handled this with like earlier tours of like Charter Oak when it was under construction is we did like 2 or 3 different tours, right? And then make sure
Yeah,
that there were no
just so
more
you
than
don't
never
3
did
of us.
Yeah,
at
you
a
can do
time.
that.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't
Yeah.
define group here. I mean, the group
Right.
could be.
Now, it becomes a
true.
pain in
Yeah.
like the dual language case,
Yeah,
right?
that
Do we
would be
really,
hard.
like, we wouldn't really want to do that, right? That becomes disruptive.
Of course,
But
you have
even-
different dual language campuses. You could do
Right.
one group to one and another group to another one.
But even last year for the Christmas things,
Mhm.
remember?
That's not a violate, but you guys can get together as long as you're not discussing.
But
business.
last year, when we did the thank you to the staff, only 2 board members appeared at each one.
Right.
Mhm.
Well,
Because of quorum issues, wasn't that right?
There were some quorum issues because board members were speaking and,
Okay,
you know,
Yeah.
gotcha.
It's a
Okay.
hard law on some things. It's real hard. But anyway, for purposes of tonight, on that one,
That
I
last
think
bullet point?
I think we need to add, there has to be less than a quorum present, because that gives us guidance as an administration as well, and if we have to do multiple visits, we'll do multiple visits. And then I will talk with Representative Shine and tell him the perhaps unintended consequence of that. Yet, unfortunately, the flip side, again, devil's advocate, is you have a board that goes out and they're gonna do visits of some special program, and then they start talking about something else, and it really runs out, and that's why we end up with the kind of legislation that we have, so. But anyway, I will alert him, and we'll put that in here about the quorum.
So Angela, are you saying that we could visit, like the dual language and watch those teachers in action and do that as long as there's not an issue of discussion regarding what?
No, you can't have a
You
quorum.
can't.
Not if there's 4 or more of you.
I think it'd be 3. 331 or 223.
because you're basically considering school business if you're watching.
Mhm. The act of watching.
Yeah, you're considering as a group. But even the bigger problem there is you'd have to tape record, you'd have to videotape your meeting, and then
Mhm.
you've got issues with FERPA. And you also frankly have issues of you observing a classroom, period. Because you really don't have an educational, I mean, it depends on the program you're observing.
Mhm.
But I would say, let's say if you were to observe the DAEP, that in and of itself is particularly sensitive, that you're observing students in a disciplinary alternative setting, when you really don't have an educational right to know the discipline of those students. So I would think board member visits to programs would have to be carefully considered.
Right.
The program,
But we can
the
do
time,
that.
The event, and you can do that in less than a quorum without any problem. Then if the board is more than a quorum, I think.
I don't think we can do it anymore.
So if we 3 here went with Robin to visit a classroom, then we can do that.
Yeah, that'd be fine. You can't introduce a 4th, so.
It's getting
Person.
fuzzy is what you're saying.
What?
I would have some reservations.
Oh.
I don't know that I want to do that.
No, I'm just
Because it
asking a
becomes-
question.
It becomes disruptive, right?
I would have a reservation, I would have reservations.
I mean, that was just an
It would
example.
depend
Yeah,
on the-
well, yeah, I know.
It would depend on the classroom, and frankly, we have so much differentiated instruction going on. I can't think of, I could probably think of an occasion that perhaps would be appropriate, but I'm thinking of more examples of how it would be inappropriate.
Right, okay.
For me, I think it's important. And that's legal and it's practitioner, and those are two different vantage
Sure,
points.
okay.
I do think, though, that you have to be careful with the FERPA. I think you do have to watch what programs that you
Mhm.
do. I mean, you
Mhm.
certainly can't do something, I'll use SPED as an example. I think you have to, that would be just, no.
Mhm.
But I think the bigger issue, the quorum, they can be resolved. I think your bigger issue is the videotaping and how do you do all that, and I'm not sure.
Mhm.
I'm really not sure. And my view is yours, Rosie. You just can go, wow. Okay, but for right now, we'll put there must be less than a quorum present. And for conversation in here and manual, I'd say when y'all talk about this with the board, this does need to be a discussion with the board because this is a new wrinkle because of the change in legislation.
Mhm. Okay, board attendance at district events, I didn't see anything in there that was of issue. Board training, that candidate workshops, that's obviously new.
That was when y'all talked about
Mhm.
whether do you do it or not do it last time, and you just put May, and so that's what I put in there.
Mhm.
Chris, any thoughts about that, you or Rosie?
Well, I'd like to say that we have the option,
Well,
right?
option,
And
yeah.
if we do it, we have to do it equitably, right? So every candidate has to get it.
Be nice
Or at
if you
least
had a
that's the
whole
option.
bunch that you had to do a
Right,
workshop.
right.
Now you're trying to beat the bushes to get them.
Standing room only.
Right,
Yes.
right.
Can we go back up to board member visits? If you go as a board member to a campus by yourself, but you're going in a volunteer position, are we still safe doing that?
Yes,
Yes.
because that says official capacity.
So I can go, I can still go do.
As a volunteer, absolutely.
Yeah, because you're going as a volunteer. You're not going because you're on the board.
Yeah,
Yeah, unofficial capacity.
About that.
it's a good question.
Badge on, badge off.
That's right.
Which one?
Well, but when you go, you put your badge on,
Right.
so actually I should be getting a driver's license thingamajig
Yeah,
rather
you
than wear
really
my
should.
Should be
board.
showing as a visitor, but I'm curious, I'm going back to that too. I'm thinking, what is new about that? I don't know what is new about.
What's that, Angel?
I don't know, when you say this is new, I don't know what is new.
About going and visiting classrooms before, because you didn't have to videotape it, and you didn't have to do public forums for that. I mean, they were always posted, and we would take board members out to see programs of interest.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the new is the thing about the public forums and the videotaping of said things. And that basically, anytime the board gets together beyond a quorum, it is a meeting at that point in time. There is nothing else anymore.
And this was the easy one.
There's,
It's just this board's never done that. This
Yeah,
board's never gone into the classroom.
yeah. It was just.
No, I was just asking if that's, I mean, if we address it here, but we can't. No.
I don't recommend it. Not without getting permission from all the parents in the classroom to have. It would just have to be a particular, really narrow, specific purpose for me to be comfortable with that.
Okay.
there's new board training in the update.
Yeah, this didn't look, is this?
We hadn't received this. Remember, this was done prior to the receipt
Oh,
of
okay,
114.
yeah, I was questioning, it seemed like it's more than 10 now.
I don't know about
I
that,
think it
but
still said 10, 10-5.
the new update requires every 2 years for trustees to receive training
The human
in
trafficking.
sex
Yes.
abuse, human trafficking, and other maltreatment of children.
Yeah, this will have to be
Fascinating
reworked.
area. I had to watch it for church, sorry.
Oh, I know, it's,
So this will rework based upon 114.
So other than making the changes for the hours, I mean, everything else seems to be,
I'm just adding that topic.
Right.
The sex trafficking
Mhm.
topic in there for every 2 years.
Another one that y'all need to be aware of is the third paragraph prior to review and adoption. It says, Texas Education Code, the beginning of that one. The announcement of your hours is a progress report on the training board members have received to date. This announcement occurs at the last board meeting prior to an election, and typically April. And that has been a change over the last 2 years. Okay. We will put these in. You will get a new draft. And probably bring it back to your next one. Okay.
Next one in January.
Yeah, in January, and Angela will get it along with you, and then she can look at it for the legal pieces of it. So hopefully in January you can finish it up then.
And then we can discuss it with the rest of the board in the January meeting.
When is the January meeting?
I don't have my calendar, Rosie.
Angela, does that sound like a good timeline for you?
Yes.
Usually you guys meet the first Monday of the month, and board doesn't meet until the 3rd. So if we stay on that time schedule, some of them are off though because you've got some interviews coming up. Let me get my big calendar.
It's January 13th,
Okay. I'm gone.
but
that day.
I think
January 13th for Jennifer.
the next policy committee meeting. I'm gonna just see something real fast here.
2020.
Yeah, you got superintendent interviews on the 6th, and so your meeting was bumped to the 13th. And board meeting is on,
The 20th.
I don't know, 20th is a student holiday. So I guess it's still on the 20th.
That's Martin Luther King Day?
Yeah,
I have it on the 20th.
yeah, so
The
I
board
guess
meeting. Yeah, I'm
staff
just
is
out the
working student
13th.
holiday.
I'm out of town.
So the 20th is our board meeting.
Are you sure,
Yes.
Dean? I thought the last couple of years that board meeting had been moved because of the holiday.
It got moved to the 27th.
Well, that's what's on the calendar. But
Remember
it has been.
Because of the-
And I know the 27th is their
Board vote.
meeting to name them up. So are you doing
Yeah,
that
so
at
it
the
has to
board
be
meeting
20th.
We could.
or at at a separate meeting?
Unless it was moved to Tuesday.
So it means we'd have to move the regular board meeting from the 20th to the 27th?
And then name,
And you've got superintendent finalist.
Yeah. And we can't or shouldn't do that at the same time?
Well, you can, sure. I guess that's
Yep.
just the announcement of the finalists on the 22nd.
Right, and what
so.
became awkward about the 20th was because it was a holiday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there was some concern about the fact it was recognizing the holiday.
Oh. Let me check and
I
see.
don't know how.
I mean,
I know that we
those are all
talked
good
about it.
points. I mean, I agree with that.
it's a teacher in service day.
Oh, it's a
so
teacher in
It is a
service.
teacher
Okay,
in
that's-
service. But now for next school year, the proposal so far in the calendars is that would be a
Mhm.
holiday.
Is it Martin
Well,
Luther King Day, the 20th?
If
Yeah.
we
It's a teacher.
moved the board meeting to the 27th, could we have a policy meeting on the 20th?
Well, you already have you moved the policy committee meeting?
Well, I know that we scheduled the superintendent meetings because I was gonna be gone that week of the 13th, so that puts me missing the policy meeting, which doesn't make me very
I've got board workshop on the 20th at 5. Not sure what that is.
Because
Oh,
that's the
round
second
interviews.
round of interviews.
Yeah, so 20th, Rosie, or your second round interviews.
So we're doing interviews on the holiday?
There's interviews on the 6th, 7th, and 8th. Then there's
So-
interviews on the 20th and 21st. And then
So-
one
The
finalist
second
is
round.
on the
Yeah,
27th.
so your board meeting
Yeah.
has to be on the 27th.
I remember
that.
Keep doing- Well,
Wow.
yeah, okay,
That's coming
well, I'm
up.
sorry. I won't.
It is.
Sorry.
I think
Every
I-
Monday is
Well,
slated, so
Golly.
just a weird
Busy
year.
time.
I just feel bad, but it's okay.
Unless it moves to another day of the week, all the Mondays are full.
Well, we're gonna
Well,
exercise
those are all
this
the
grievance
posted
policy.
days.
Yeah, I
in
know,
January.
well, I know you're gonna kick me off.
Do it firm, too.
Okay.
the only option is changing to no day of the week. Okay, we'll real quickly set up Angela, real quickly, because she's done all the work. When I read through this, there are 6 categories of, basic categories of policies, legal and local. And I think if you divided out all your policies, that probably 95% of them would fall into one or the other of this one. Number 1, homeless. Lots and lots of policy on homeless, and they're not called homeless children anymore. Homeless students are called students of homeless families. The second one is all underneath emergency planning. It includes emergency planning, trauma, security, personnel, marshals, all of that, but it's all security. The third one is sex trafficking. Feeds through a lot of it. Fourth one is cyber security. Fifth one is early literacy. And the sixth one I thought was interesting is personal devices, PDAs. Okay, and with that, I'm gonna, all I did, Angela, on this sheet is I color coded because it's by department, and that was more for us to use than for you. So if you see colors, it just means that it's by department. It doesn't change any of the content. Okay, Angela.
Okay, it's 6:45, so I don't know which y'all's pleasure is.
Well, I guess it depends on what our plan is in terms of getting this.
It does. It really does depend. Normally, we would present it to the board for a first reading, highlight, and I would highlight for the board those legal policies of particular interest. But by now, you guys, you've been to training, and there's been a lot of conversation about a lot of the legal policy changes, especially then you were all required to do the legislative update, so you heard it. So you've probably heard now 2, 3, 4 times some of these things. And usually we provide the link to the legal and local annotated versions in the agenda memo that accompanies the first reading. I would just briefly highlight both for you, tell you those local policies that we're continuing to look at, and we'll bring those back at the next meeting with recommendations. The last few updates, we have made some revisions to the proposed local policies, and we've been able to present them to you at the same time that we present the other proposed changes. So the first reading and then highlight with the highlights, and then the second usually is on the consent agenda, because usually the proposed changes are been pretty slight. So in this case, this is there were policies that I would highlight for the board of particular interest. Let's see. We've talked quite a bit already about, well, we've mentioned walking quorums. The legislature made some changes to the Open Meetings Act to clearly define what they mean by a quorum, and to clearly prohibit a series of communications which we've known in the past as walking quorums. And then in
What page are you on, Angela?
the second page, BE legal. And then BE local changes just your policy. You can't call an emergency meeting, or you can now, you can give as little as an hour notice instead of 2. Then we've been talking about the changes to public comment, which are in BED. And I think based on the conversation tonight, I'll ask our policy consultant to send us the version that limits public comment to agenda items and see how different that is from what they've already proposed. Then,
BBD, I'm going to reiterate, going backwards just a tad, talked about that sex trafficking. You do have to pick that up every 2 years. Rosie, going back to something that you said, such an important one. Also remember in a lot of these that if you put something of school nature on your personal cell phones or computers, that's still subject to public information. That was a big strand that covers a lot of them.
well, I wanted to not to scare anybody about that. That's no different
I agree.
than it has always been. And I think just highlighting that, pulling it out and highlighting it has made it news, but it's not new. Let's see. Then, I'm trying to self-edit here. Your emergency operating plans. So Senate Bill 11, there are a lot of changes throughout that are directly related to Senate Bill, two big bills. Of course, House Bill 3 had to do with the funding changes, and then there was a lot tacked in onto that bill, and then Senate Bill 11 has to do with safety and security and all of the related issues. And so emergency plans now have new requirements at the top of page 4, CKC legal and local. The legislatures, upon discovery that some districts had not even submitted a plan to the Texas School Safety Center, now that's required by law that it be submitted. And then your emergency operating plan has to include procedures that it didn't have to include before, in particular active shooter emergency procedures and information for substitutes. CKE local and legal has to do with clarification of the duties of SROs. But as you see here, I've noted that our MOUs with the cities of Temple and Belton already define the SRO's responsibilities. You guys approve those documents. They have been automatically renewing the last couple of years, so they may not be feel that familiar to you. But your current MOUs already meet the changes in the law. Then there's changes to technology. There's a whole new policy, CQ local. They have taken out references to cybersecurity and made it its own new policy, CQB. And this is new. It will require the district to designate a cybersecurity coordinator. And this is where your training is going. The board's going to have additional training on cybersecurity.
On our, going back to BQ, we are required to have a trauma-informed care policy. Is that something that they will provide, or do we write our own, or what?
So, let me see. There were some things we're waiting. So, we're waiting. The Texas School Safety Center is supposed to be developing procedures for threat assessments
Mhm.
TA is still developing the rules on what our reports are supposed to look like, and training is still being developed.
Okay.
They're doing a training in June down in,
At SI? No.
no, I'll get the right place. It's in San Marcos. That's where all this comes from.
It's
Oh,
the
the
school
safety.
safety center.
Yeah, but they're
Well-
they're doing a new training in June. It's
Oh,
a different
oh,
training
oh.
than has been out there, just
Okay.
kind of FYI.
Oh, that's
So,
good.
That's very good.
Well, and also, they continue to expand the training responsibilities for SROs.
mhm,
And we've been watching that over the last several sessions. And we have also been asking our SROs to engage in more training. And that's part of that too, I think, training offer for them. Okay, let's see. So this particular document that you guys have is the worksheet that I have over the years prepared for leadership team to review together and evaluate. And then where there's blanks, in the column impact on existing practice, that's just, you see this is a fairly newly created document because the local policies weren't issued to the districts until November the 15th. So to get everything in here and to the assistant superintendents to take a look at how this impacts what they're doing. Now, if I knew it didn't change anything, or I know changes have already been made, right now, all the notes on this document are mine. So it may be that there will be edits to this document once the leadership team has had an opportunity to review it and review the policies and see, oh, this does change what we were doing, or no, we already changed it. Most of the time, the administrators have made the changes as soon as they learned about them. And certainly by now, in December of the school year, it's unusual to not have changes, or changes are underway. So when it comes to SB 11, there are so many things that districts are still waiting for guidance and training that's been required, like the human trafficking training. I don't think that's been developed either. Okay, let's see. EHBB, which is on page 7. You probably remember when you learned about HB3 that the allotment for G2 students was cut. And so they basically have rewritten that provision, and so you'll be seeing a new annual program evaluation. Deanna's team's been doing a great job with that over the years, and I don't know that it'll look much different. It's probably all things that we've been doing because we've been adhering to the state's recommended plan for over 10 years, and so I don't know that they're requiring anything that we're not already doing. I thought one thing that might be of interest is FFAA local. Now, members of the band will be required to have a health exam, just like football or any other UIL sanctioned sport. And then
What
you
page
see
is that now?
FFAA, page 9. Then FFB local talks a lot about all the different, this is a new policy and all of the changes that are required by Senate Bill 11. And again, I don't know at this point whether or not administration will recommend some changes to these proposed local policies, because our folks are still working. And I know Mr. Morgan has been working since the beginning of school to implement all the requirements of Senate Bill 11. But you see there's some things here we're still waiting on.
When you talked about on page 9 about the FAA local physical exams, the date last revised was 10/27/17, so that's a new,
It's
so there's
since
something
last-
this year.
Yes.
Okay. So it's been revised since then.
All of this is in this update right now.
Right now,
all
right? Okay.
now. Yeah, you know, when I first put the column date last revised, I think there was, whatever I was working on was something that hadn't been revised in a long time. But when I was preparing this, it seemed like everything had just been revised. So I thought, why am I
So what you
including
put in
that
revision
column?
is what's happened now, right?
Right.
Okay.
Right, yes.
So like
yes,
AIC was just revised in May and it's being revised again.
Yes.
Right, okay.
Although I like it, it's a great frame of reference, whether it's that we have multiple changes in something, or you have one like FFAF legal, which was back in 2012, related to food allergies. It is a great frame of reference, though.
Okay.
I know it's a pain to do,
Yeah.
but I do like it.
And then you see, Rosie, at the top of page 10, FFBA local about trauma informed care. Again, I don't know what resources we've already been provided, so I don't know what Mike would say about that right now. FL local talks, that's your policy that addresses confidentiality of student records, and that's where that definition of legitimate educational interest is. And that FL local also defines who a school official is, because only school officials with a legitimate educational interest have the right to look at confidential
Records.
student records. And so now, because they have created campus and district threat assessment teams that include people that, for example, mental health professionals that the district may have to contract with to come in to review particular cases. Now they're having to expand the definition of who is a school official to include someone who might be appointed to that threat assessment team. You as board members are defined as school officials, but even school officials have to have a legitimate educational interest in the student's record to look at it or be privy to, and you know, not everything that goes on in a classroom is considered a student's educational record. It's really case by case determination. Okay, let's see. Okay, so that's big bird's eye view. The summary is the legal and the local. Did y'all have this before when you got here tonight, this summary? Or that's new, that's
No.
today? Okay. There's just a lot in here, and I don't mind
Bunch.
getting into more detail. But it is probably all things you heard at your post-legislative training.
Of course, these are all, I mean, promulgated by the legislature, so, I mean,
Right,
there's nothing we can do about any of this, it's
No,
just something
you
we
just
have to
need to know
follow. Yeah, I just
about
need to know about it.
right. So then your local policies are those that you've been given a copy, and interestingly enough, there aren't that many. And those, it's much easier to see, well, they're annotated. So we talked about BE local, which is public participation.
Angela, let me-
CDA.
Excuse me for just a second.
Yeah,
I want you to cure some ignorance for me.
yes.
You know, I see all of these abbreviations, this BAA, I mean, it has no rhyme or reason for me right now. I mean, explain that to me.
Yeah, so the way they organize is by letters. So A has to do with accountability-related issues. And what they do is the first letter is all under section accountability. And then the way they organize it is AA will have a subsection, and then AB a subsection. So probably if I were to include the full title, let's just go on AF, it would have been accountability, innovation districts. So the first letter is the section the policy is related to, and then the subtitle or the subsection is the next letter. So the way they add is by adding, you can see when you get down, okay, and so B relates to board matters, governance issues. C relates to purchasing and business. D relates to employees and personnel matters. E relates to student, generally E is instruction, curriculum. F is student, and G is community. So, you know if you're looking at a policy that starts with B, that it has to do with a board governance issue. A policy that starts with F has to do with a student issue. A good way to kind of get it next time you're in Belton ISD board policy online, go to the table of contents. And if you pull down the table of contents, you'll see, you can just keep drilling down in the table of
I was
contents.
looking at this yesterday.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
So, when you mentioned last month at the meeting about how the policy is 990 pages,
Yeah.
the policy's probably close to 3,000 pages. It just happens to be that the policies that they're revising in this particular packet are 950 pages. But it's
Wow.
probably, if you were to print your entire policy, you'd have 3 or 4 binders that size.
20 years ago, it was one binder. It's changed that much.
Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah. So if you're looking at an e-policy that has to do with instruction, that's another thing too, is generally when you have certain administrators who are presenting to the board on a policy, you're gonna have Deanna, you're gonna see Deanna if it's an e-policy, you're gonna see Todd Schiller if it's a D policy, you're gonna see Mike Morgan if it's an F, just because that happens to be their responsibility. But it's not exclusive, because there will be policies, there is a lot of immigration, personnel, it's crossover.
So going back to local, Angela, you were talking about BE, which was a local.
BE local, there wasn't anything in here that,
Just days.
the only significant change in here was it changed, instead of 2 hours notice, it does give the board an option to call a meeting within an hour. You don't have to make the change, but it wasn't anything like.
A lot of this stuff came after the hurricane too, and that's
Mhm.
proceeded on. And BED was the one that you were gonna call TASB.
We're gonna get an alternate version.
Beautiful.
And then CDA, this only change allows, I haven't talked to Jennifer Land about this in particular, but it allows the board to invest bond proceeds and pledged revenue to the extent allowed by law, and that's really complicated, and generally, the board has separate bond counsel. And
Right there.
I know that Jennifer Land, anytime she's considering bond funds, she consults his firm. CH local, the change here, the only significant is the addition of the requirement that the superintendent develop purchasing procedures. But I know that your purchasing department already has purchasing procedures, so that seemed to be pretty routine. CKC local legislation requires the board to make additions to its emergency operating plan to include those 2 items. Seems pretty simple. CKE, it adds a paragraph about student school resource officers' duties need to be defined, which yours already are. I haven't looked at this year's district improvement plan to see whether or not there's a reference to SROs, but it requires now that you do include that. CQ, the only big change is they took out a reference to cybersecurity and created a new CQB. And I don't know yet whether or not this needs to have any changes. Technology's under Dr. Muller's purview, so I'll wait to hear from him. It's interesting, for as huge as a packet as this is, it impacts your local policies very little. EHBB, it does have I know we already provide parent sessions for gifted and talented, so I don't know that that's a change in anything we're doing. Or in the program evaluation section, again, that's something that Deanna,
It does restrict though, once elementary, once middle school, once high school.
And it changes that. There's quite a few changes in GT.
Actually, that's for the better.
so as far as the proposed local changes go, I think probably we'll need to get more input from staff on
And
whether or
they all
not
received this today.
the proposed changes should be accepted as submitted by TASB, or whether or not they have recommendations to the board on changes. So, because other than the BED that we've already talked about at length, I didn't see, I'm not aware yet of any changes that need to be made. So we could go ahead and include the link to the legal and local as a first reading to the board this month. And then you may or may not get to it in January, depending on the number of changes suggested by staff or just y'all's calendar.
Yeah, got a lot going on in January.
If we waited to have a first, we could have there's really nothing critical about your local changes.
It doesn't conflict with
So the local changes are relatively small.
for you to think.
The biggest one's gonna be the public comment. And so, and that one is, what, you could wait to have your first reading in January,
You said that too?
after
You want me to?
policy
add, or
committee
you
meeting
send that to me?
could consider
I
the
can send it to
recommended
you.
changes to the local if there are. Look at the new BED, and then have your second reading in February. It's your pleasure. I know that it makes a big difference.
Sounds like a better timeline
I would
than.
think so.
I would like for y'all at some point, at y'all's call in, to look at your BF local on, you've got 2 meeting readings right now, and you've got a policy committee that has come into play. And so I'd just like to have y'all discuss that with Angela and I both here, and Deanna, or whoever else wants to be here, to see what y'all want to do. That's a local policy, it's not legal. You got a, we had one emergency policy, I forgot what it was, that we used this as the first meeting, and it's called meetings in the policy, and then when you had the board meeting as your second meeting. But these are not time-sensitive things, so that's fine. But you got a really long window, and you're seeing that in this discussion. So you may keep it exactly as it is, but I think it bears discussion among you to see what you wish to do. Now, if you have something that comes up that is, I hate to use the word emergency, but real critical, you could have 6 weeks in there before you have a final approval by the board based upon your BF local. So it's something for you to think about.
Before we comment on that, our timeline right now is that the board operating procedures, we're going to get a draft at our next meeting,
Yes, sir.
which will be in January. And then at that point, we can take the final to the board for approval in our January meeting.
Correct.
So that's our number one item, right?
Yes, sir.
So in our next meeting, we'll get the draft, go over the draft, and then we can talk about BF local at that time,
Yes, sir.
right?
Yeah, and you can do BF local at any point in time. I just think it bears discussion because it is your policy, it's your local policy. And then between now and that January meeting, that Angela will have time to go through it, fine tooth comb and put in the 114 and all that kind of stuff. I will go ahead and send you guys a draft and Angela a draft, within a week. Because the changes you made tonight compared with what we had the first time are pretty small. And then that allows Angela time to work on it and you guys to look at it again on your own if you want and make some changes. And don't, if they're like missing a word here or there, feel free to send that to us at any point in time because we can make those easily without changing content.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I'm following. The board operating procedures will be presented at the December meeting and voted on in January, correct?
It'll be presented again, or you'll get it again for your January policy committee meeting. And then it'll be presented to the board for final approval at the regular January meeting.
Okay.
Because
So in our-
this is December.
In our meeting this month,
Okay.
I think all we're going to mention is that looks like we've come to perhaps a draft, a final draft, and then we will get the draft in January, and then we'll present the final for their approval in the January meeting.
That'd be great.
So in our next meeting, in our next policy meeting, we're going to look at the draft, and then with the changes that we've made today, and then we will take a look at the local policy.
Yes, that are the changes, if any, that are being proposed by administration.
Right.
And we know that you'll be looking at a new BED local.
Right.
And
Okay.
hopefully, then, so then we could have a first reading of everything, the board have
January.
everything January.
So approval would be February.
And our second reading in February.
Second,
So this is not
would
the
be in
first reading.
consent.
That's right. Because there's changes.
Just a consent item for the second,
That's what I'm talking about.
for the February meeting, right?
It's a really long time. And that's why I'm saying, you need to think about your BF local because you've got 3 months now before you can adopt policies. And if they're not time sensitive, it's not a big deal. But if they're time sensitive, that's a really, really long time. And Charles call.
So are you okay with that? I mean, in terms of putting the local policy for the consent item on, in February?
Oh, yeah, that's fine. Because again, none of these are time sensitive,
Right.
so.
If all the proposed, if this committee considered all the policies as proposed in January, you could put it on the January meeting for approval. It's up to you whether or not you want to, the first reading should be the policies as you're considering them. So then
That doesn't work, does it?
Mm-hmm.
No.
well, it's odd that you wouldn't have the second reading as on consent. You'd have it on,
But we're coming, like with our local policies proposed, we are coming on the January 13 policy meeting
Right.
with changes as proposed.
right.
So that is a first reading?
Well, it's the first time they will have seen that, unless it remained exactly the same.
The question is, can it be a first reading with a committee, not with
It
all?
can, because these are posted meetings.
Correct.
It can.
So then it could go to board approval on
It
the
could,
20th.
It could, that's
It
true.
could.
In January.
In January.
Right.
So we can review everything in our next policy meeting in January and then have it for approval
Yeah, you could.
In January
You
rather
could.
than February.
Yes.
in January as a consent item.
Or not, however y'all want to do it.
I mean, it's pretty voluminous. I mean, just to wrap your head around
And
all
Angela
this.
did legal at the same time. even though it's in place, I guess regardless, but.
Well, you could break it up. You could consider tonight to be the first reading of your legal.
That's true, and that would get that out of the way.
It's a change, and so it's up to you and whether the rest of the board's comfortable with not having as much time to look at it as they have in the past. So that'll be, it depends. So this could be your first reading, you could have a second reading and approval of legal. I would recommend keeping the legal and local together, so it doesn't get confusing.
Right,
and you're
well,
not
we can always table it if someone,
Yeah. Your legal's in place regardless of what you
I mean,
do, to be really honest.
there's no discretion there, it is what it is.
Right.
It's the local.
And then the biggest local is the meetings.
Well, you may
As
have
far
a
as I
big
know, but
GT
there might
coming
be
off
other
of that.
changes.
Okay.
Yeah, you may have a big gift in town.
At this point, let's just plan on bringing back the recommended local changes to you in January and putting update 114 on the board's agenda in January, and we'll decide at that point whether it's the second reading or not.
Agree.
Okay,
That's good.
I think it's a good plan.
Yep.
Okay, so for your next agenda, we'll put draft 2, 3, or 4, whatever we're on this one. We'll put the finalization of update 114 local legal, and then we'll put the BF local for discussion. And if you want to defer that for another meeting, that's perfectly fine. But you're going to have a real full agenda again. You had a huge meeting tonight. So, you know, if you want to take that one off and do that at a time where you don't have quite as much, that's fine.
Okay.
Y'all did well. That's a lot of information.
Chris, anything else? Rosie?
No.
I'm proud of y'all because without this would all be in a board something. And so it saves your board meetings a lot. So thank you. If y'all have questions, then please let us know. And we'll get you some answers.
All right. Angela, thank you very much.
I just have a concrete question.
Yeah.
If I go to Southwest on Thursday, do I get a visitor badge? Because they've always told me to wear my board
No.
thing. Get a visitor badge.
To make it real clean, get your visitor badge.
Okay, that's all I have to know right now. Thank you.
Bottom line is I want to make sure that you're not going to go in there and have sex trafficking with
Yeah.
with
no,
kids.
thank
So.
you.
Oh, what an awful thing, my gosh. Well, again, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I guess we're adjourned then.
Okay, appreciate it. It's